Welcome to the Wolverine Confidential, your Michigan sports podcast from MLive. I'm your host, Eli Zink, a producer here at MLive.
I'm Aaron McMann. Some of you probably know me from our weekly Wolverine show we've been doing.
Yep.
We're back with a weekly podcast talking all things Michigan football and basketball.
And I'm Andrew Kahn, very excited to have started with MLive this past fall. I'm covering primarily right now the Michigan men's basketball team.
All right, guys. The big topic across Michigan sports right now is signing day. It was yesterday, and honestly, a lot of people are a little bit disappointed in this year's class, ranked 21st overall according to the 24/7 composite. Aaron, what's going on with this class?
Yeah, I think it was a little underwhelming for what Harbaugh has produced the last couple of years, a pair of top 10 classes. This was, in a way, a step down. They had no five-star recruits. 7 4-stars and then 12 3-stars. So I think there's some guys here that are in a way diamonds in the rough. I think the Michigan coaching staff is in a way shifted the way they've recruited. I don't necessarily know if they're necessarily not targeting higher tier guys, but they're looking for the guys that are maybe on the cusp of potentially breaking out. And I think you got some potential guys here, some highlights. There were some lowlights yesterday. They missed, they whiffed. Whatever you
Couple
want to
swings
say.
and misses on
Yeah.
a couple, and key guys too at key positions.
Yeah, and especially Otis Reese. That's the one I think Michigan fans need to focus in the most on, just because he was committed. He had been committed for over a year.
Right.
This was a guy that Michigan thought they had. They by all accounts they had, and then Georgia comes in the last 6 months to kind of swoops them out.
Yeah, he had a lot of visits to Georgia. You could sort of see the writing on the wall, but equally, it's still disappointing for Harbaugh and the Wolverines, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Harbaugh talked about this yesterday in his press conference, and he was asked about missing on Otis Reese. He didn't say much about it. He said they
What's he going to say?
Yeah,
Right?
you could tell he was a little upset, but he obviously didn't want to go into it. Keep in mind, these are kids. These are 17, 18-year-old kids. I mean, they're making decisions on the fly. They have people coming at them from every direction trying to change their mind. And Reese, he changed his mind, and that happened.
Aaron, you mentioned diamonds in the rough. I think fans, that might be upset with this class, would say what's better than diamonds in the rough are actual diamonds. And Michigan did not have those. No top 100 recruits. Now they had a couple guys on the fringe there with Hutchinson and McGrone. Were right there. But no top 100 recruits is kind of hard to stomach. And you could talk about the Harbaugh class from a few years ago where there was that transition and you sort of give them a pass. But I think what people will look at is that they were, a distant third in the Big Ten behind Ohio State and Penn State. And I counted 6 teams in front of them that had new coaches this year. So that it didn't affect their classes.
Well, speaking of new coaches, I mean, that sort of thing. The last 2 classes, you had, shiny new Harbaugh. And then this year you have 8-5 Harbaugh, and that's a lot. That's a different recruiting pitch.
Yeah, and I think that's where the losing comes into play here. Michigan at the beginning of this recruiting class, I think looked good. It had a potential for being a top 10 class in the country. Then Michigan goes out and loses to Michigan State. They go in and lose to Ohio State. And keep in mind, the Ohio State game is oftentimes where they bring in some of those higher tier recruits, those top guys they want to impress. And they end up losing the game. Nicholas Petit-Frier, another guy they lost out on yesterday. Now he had Michigan in his top 5. Michigan.
He was at the Ohio State game.
He was at the Ohio State
right.
game. Michigan loses. Then they lose 3 games at the end of the season. They set up shop, and I wrote about this yesterday on MLive. But they set up shop at Berkeley Prep in Tampa to practice for the Outback Bowl. That's where Petit-Frier went to school at. He was there. We saw him, watching practice that week. That was meant to, impress him, try and court him, and then they go out and lose the Outback Bowl.
Right.
So the loss is mounted, and I think that's where some of those top-tier guys, those guys that waited for the second signing day. Now, keep in mind, this is a different signing class. You had the early signing period in December before the bowl season, and then you've got the second signing day, which was the typical signing day, and you had some of the top-tier guys hold out and wait, and I think that's where Michigan got burned, so to speak.
All right. So let's break down this class for what, instead of the misses, focus on what they do have. You got a few top prospects. You got some Wolverine lineage in Aiden Hutchinson. You got McGrone, as we talked about, great tight end out of Texas, Mustafa Muhammad, and, of course, Miles Sims from Georgia. Who are you really thinking is going to stand out or possibly be an early contributor?
Yeah, I mean, basically all those guys you mentioned, those 3 or 4. I mean, McGrone is a fringe 5-star guy, 24/7. Bumped him up actually to 5 stars about a month ago. He's a linebacker out of Indianapolis, and that's a position of strength I think Michigan's had for a few years now. I think they're going to continue to be good going forward.
And a lot of people say he's sort of built kind of like Devin Bush and is a real athletic guy, a guy with some speed, guy who sort of brings the wood when he hits.
Yeah, I mean 6'1", 215. He's obviously going to put on some weight here at Michigan. They'll probably ask him to put on a few pounds.
Right.
And once these guys go through the winter conditioning programs, and he'll likely redshirt this year. I mean that's just the nature of the beast with the depth at linebacker. But yeah, he has the potential to be good. I mean, it's easy to say, sit down and say, well, these guys could be good. They probably will be good, but they've got to go through the program. Aiden Hutchinson's another guy you mentioned. The coaching staff is really high on him.
Really stood out at the Army All-American Bowl.
He did, yeah. Defensive end out of Dearborn Divine Child. He's a local guy, so I think that's maybe why he's gotten more notoriety these last few months. They really like him. He was like a 4-star. He was another 4-star guy, 112th overall in the recruiting class. 6'6", 260. So he's already decent size. He's
great bloodlines. I mean, 2 All-American Hutchinsons have come through Michigan already. So
yeah.
Your fans have to be hoping for a third.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the potential again. Mustafa Muhammad's another guy. Michigan is particularly stacked tight end. That's a position where Harbaugh's recruited, in depth here the last couple of years. They recruited in this class. They had 4 tight ends, potentially a 5th. So you've got a lot of guys that will give Michigan options in the receiving game. That's obviously been a struggle here in the last year.
Right.
So going forward, I mean, Michigan's stacked. I think at linebacker, they're stacked at defensive end. Miles Sims is a guy I didn't really talk about from Atlanta, another 4-star cornerback. Michigan, I think, again, is building depth at the quarterback spot, which is good for the secondary moving forward.
And it's the type of system where you really need depth. You see some people talking about there's so many defensive backs and there's so many tight ends. Yes, we'll talk about the offensive tackle misses because it needs to be addressed. But with the type of defense they run, in Don Brown's defense, you need corners who can stick on guys, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to play, that much press coverage. And so now they have that depth. And, I don't know if it's a numbers game and they're hoping that, at least one turns out or, maybe they'll run more, 5 defensive back sets. But I think that's the right direction. And you got a lot of really good athletes in this class, including the Green Twins as well.
Yeah, those guys that come up. Joe Milton's the guy we haven't really touched on yet. He's already enrolled in Michigan, quarterback, 4-star quarterback out of Orlando. He figures to probably have a shot here in a couple of years. He'll likely be a redshirt given Michigan's quarterback situation this year. But he's another guy that the Michigan coaching staff is really high on. He's ranked, I think, the 9th quarterback in the class, 204th overall. He's got all the tools. I was watching tape of him the other night. Really good arm. He's good in the pocket. He can scramble. He's an athlete. He's the type of guy, quarterback, I think Harbaugh needs to change things up. He's been so focused on the pocket passers, and he's got a bunch of them in his depth chart right now. But given what we saw with this Michigan offense this year and some of the changes that need to be made, he could potentially be a guy to watch down the line.
Now, the one thing that I think could be a concern is they only took 1 quarterback in this class. Obviously, they lost out on Kevin Doyle just yesterday. Was it 2 days ago he committed?
Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday.
Okay, yeah.
And that was something I think some of us saw coming. He's a 3-star guy. He committed before actually Milton committed. He committed, then Joe Milton committed, but Milton's actually jumped the gun where he not only committed, he's already enrolled. He signed during the early signing period. And he's already enrolled in Michigan. He's already here. He's already going through the program. He's already learning the playbook. He's going through conditioning. So he's, in a way, gotten a jump start. And given the quarterback situation, which we can go into later or next week, or we could talk all day about that. But there are so many guys ahead of him on the depth chart. So that worked against him. He saw the handwriting on the wall, whereas it was going to be a difficult spot for him to go in and get playing time. He probably would have redshirted the first year. But beyond that, you don't know if Shea Patterson's going to be eligible. If he's not, then he's got another 2 years of eligibility. You've got, obviously, McCaffrey sitting there. You've got Brandon Peters is up in the air. He's got 3 more years of eligibility. So you've got a lot of guys ahead of him. So he chose to go to Arizona.
Now, and it makes sense. It makes sense. And the thing with Milton that I'm hearing a lot on message boards. Now, message boards are what they are. But a lot of people thinking Milton had accuracy issues. You look at his numbers in high school and, not what you want from a quarterback, but he has all the physical tools in the world. People are saying probably will move to tight end. You think there's any truth to that?
I don't think so. Just based on the way Michigan's recruited, like I mentioned, they got 4 tight ends in this class. I mean, they're pretty deep at tight end right now as it is. I would be surprised if they move him. And not only with Doyle decommitting, but him being the only quarterback in this class, I find it harder to believe for him to be moved. I mean, maybe that's a decision they make in the future. It's possible. But right now, I haven't. There hasn't been any indication from Harbaugh, the coaching staff, that that's going to be a plan.
Too many tools there that are worth taking a look at. All right, so let's move on here a little bit away from recruiting, but you did mention the quarterbacks, and that's
that's the number one question. I don't mean to interrupt.
No.
Every week, it's either questions about Shea Patterson's eligibility or Peters going forward. I'm getting questions about McCaffrey. Everybody's interested in him. That seems to be the number one topic with this football team. Who's going to play quarterback and what happens from here?
Rightfully so.
Right. No, given the struggles this year, you saw obviously the injuries. Brandon Peters looked good at times. He didn't look so good. Looked so hot in the bowl game. There's a lot of things are up in the air right now, and then you throw in this wrinkle with Wilton Spate, who reportedly is open to returning if Shea Patterson is deemed ineligible. There's so many moving factors here. It could literally the starting quarterback next season at this point right now could be one of 3, maybe 4 guys, and that's
right.
I think what makes this thing so fascinating.
Well, and so you hear the whispers about Wilton Spate, or maybe they're more than whispers at this point. Possibly returning. Shea Patterson, I feel like most people think he's the answer, but he struggled very similarly to O'Korn with accuracy issues and being sort of a gunslinger. He's going to throw the ball over, and he might try to fit it into a tight window and throw a real bad pick. So he may not be the solution. Don't sleep on guys like McCaffrey. Peters didn't look great in the bowl game, but he looked great at other moments in the season. What can we expect, even though there's still no word on Patterson? What can we expect from this competition? Do you really think it's going to be that open, or if Patterson did get clearance, is he just the guy?
I think if Patterson is deemed eligible to play in 2018, I think is from a tools perspective, from an experience standpoint, from a talent perspective, I think he's your front runner. Now, and I've written this already too, Peters has the edge just in regards to the playbook and familiarity with the coaching staff. The coaching staff knows what he can do. He knows what to expect. He knows what he needs to do to win the job. But you're right; it's going to be a lot of competition. Whether Patterson's deemed eligible or not, it's going to be Patterson or Peters. If Patterson's deemed eligible, then it's going to be Peters, and probably McCaffrey's going to have a run at it too.
Right.
So and then you got again the outlier, Wilton Spate, whether or not he comes back. If he comes back, you assume he would be the starter. But there's just so much up in the air right now. It's going to really the first domino to fall is going to be Patterson's eligibility, and then once that's determined, which could come in the next month, next 2 months, a couple weeks, we don't really know. We can't decipher this yet.
I think we're looking ahead to the spring. It's going to be one of the more interesting spring games we've seen, and everything that comes out of spring practice. And we'll be following your coverage very closely because everyone, as much as it's frustrating to fans, everyone loves a quarterback competition. I mean, it's one of the most exciting things you can watch in the off season. And with so many options at the table and things being so unclear, it's going to be really interesting to see who comes out on top. And if someone like a Joe Milton, who was an early enrollee, could actually make some noise. Because you heard about McCaffrey last year on the scout team. Granted, he's running other packages and other offenses on the scout team. But, it's always, good to hear about the potential. And people have to keep in mind, the quarterback position has been recruited very well under Harbaugh. Peters was, I believe, fringe top 100 guy. McCaffrey, he was a top 10 quarterback. Milton is this really toolsy guy. They've got the horses in the stable.
He just hasn't developed one yet. That's
right.
The thing. You saw Jake.
Which is an anomaly, though, for Harbaugh. He always develops quarterbacks. So
being a former quarterback, you'd think he would. So this is his time. I think these next couple of years are going to be pivotal in the development of these guys, in showing whether or not these recruits are what Harbaugh thought they would be. So and we keep harping on the quarterback, and that's great and all. And you saw some flashes last year, but Michigan, and I don't mean to get off topic, but Michigan has so many other problems right now. They've got to develop some guys at receiver. I think I wrote this last week or 2 weeks ago on MLive, but I think there are positives come out of the receivers. I think they can take a step in development, but then you got the offensive line too that has a lot of questions. There's a lot of things up in the air right now at the tackle spots. So the quarterback can be great. Patterson could be ruled eligible. He could be fantastic. He could be the guy that you saw at Ole Miss. But that all isn't going to happen unless you got protection and you got receivers to catch the ball. And last year they didn't.
That was the issue, right?
Sure. And given NCAA precedent and your feeling right now, do you think Patterson will be eligible?
I would say no. If I had a gun to my head or if I had to put money on the line, I'd say, and I've written this already, I don't think Patterson would be. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to be. The NCAA may decide that, that
NCAA is unpredictable.
That's the thing.
They are
you don't know what
inconsistent and unpredictable.
Yeah. And then there's this rule proposal out there right now that would allow, players from programs that have been, in trouble with the NCAA to transfer without penalty. So that could open up an opportunity for Patterson to play. There's a lot of things up in the air right now. If I had to say, if I had to wager, I'd say no. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I don't mean to I want to put a damper on Wolverines fans. Their prognostications or their desires or whatever. It may happen, but I don't know.
It's not a doomsday scenario if it doesn't, though. Like you mentioned, there are candidates there. And there's a coach there that has a track record of getting a lot out of that position. But
can you trust that track record? Can you? And
Oh.
I think you do. I think you have to at this point. 8-5 is not a great season, but fans must have a very short memory if they don't remember what Brady Hoke's last year was like or the Rich Rod tenure. I mean, Michigan fans stretch from newborns to people in their 90s. And the people on the latter side of things should remember that and maybe should be a little more positive in the outlook. You're coming off a program that has 2 top 10 signing classes in 2017, 2016. You had a rough year this year, but you also have a coach who was the savior, maybe isn't viewed that way anymore, but who's, as you said, Andrew, whose track record speaks for itself, and sometimes you just have to have faith. 3 seasons isn't that much time. Even Nick Saban, his first 3 seasons weren't magical. Maybe he had bagged one by his 3rd season. I'd have to look it up. But, I mean, at some point you have to say you got to trust in the guy because all this turnover is not going to breed success either.
No, perspective is key. If you would have said Harbaugh would come in, have a pair of 10-win seasons, and I've said this before, and he turns over 2 10-win seasons to start, I think most Michigan fans would have taken that. Now, yes, he's taking a step back in year 3, 8-5 now. It's not all doom and gloom, and they got to a bowl game, and they're competitive in some of their big games. Ohio State, Michigan State, they lost, but they were competitive.
And they looked like they were going to win the Ohio State game this year with O'Korn at quarterback, and who was struggling. And it's a good time for a Beeline comparison. I mean, people wanted Beeline out the door when in that year when I think they were just piling up injuries. Was that 3 years ago?
3 seasons ago.
3 seasons ago, and people were calling for Beeline. Said now he's revered as so. There's some inconsistency in how I think programs are appreciated.
Step back and put things into context. And I always say this to folks that are upset with Harbaugh or want change. That they're sudden about change. But can you imagine someone else being in that spot or being coach and doing what Harbaugh's doing? I mean, this program is back in the limelight. It's been back in the limelight a couple of years now. Yes, they need to take that next step. That's the next key here. I think the players are in
But
place.
they're positioned to do it. They have 2
Yeah.
really good classes. They've got defenses that are consistently, top 5 defenses. If they can get the offense together, it's going to happen. But that's a big if.
It is, and Harbaugh mentioned this in his press conference the other day after signing day. But they've kind of retooled the offensive coaching staff a little bit. They had some guys shuffle in and out. Dan Enos has been a big topic of discussion. But Harbaugh made a point of mentioning that they're beefing up the offensive coaching staff because they realize the offense is lagged behind, and they're not. It's not where the defense is. It's not where they want it to be. So they're making efforts to try and improve it.
So we mentioned Beeline. Let's transition a little bit to basketball. We have a season that has been, to some people, not a surprise, but to a lot of fans, really successful. And the trajectory right now that they're on, looking like a tournament team, looking like they could make a push in the Big Ten tournament. What's going on currently with the program? We talked about possible offensive concerns. And just overall, where do you see this team headed?
Yeah, it's much like football, the problems right now are on offense, which is very very rare for a John Beilein coach team.
One of the most efficient offenses in the NCAA year in, year out.
Sure, and this year it's been inconsistent. 3-point shooting has been a problem. They torched the Nets at Purdue. A lot of people watched that game, 92-88. They could not miss. Since then, the 3-point shooting, 7 of 25, 8 of 32, 5 of 22 the other night at Northwestern. That's 25% cumulatively over those 3 games. Xavier Simpson has cooled off. He got off to a hot start.
He was shooting 48% for a while, and
he was a team leader.
And then Duncan Robinson's he's a fantastic shooter, but having a down year. It seems like not only are they not shooting well individually, but just as a collective, they're all seem to be having down years.
Right. I mean, and Jordan Poole, he's been bringing him off the bench as a spark, and he's cooled off the last 2 games. So it's kind of been, it's not just one guy. That's really been the primary area of concern. Now, a lot of people are talking about the point guard situation. And I just a history lesson here. You've got a lineage of point guards at Michigan that has just been, spectacular, from Darius Morris to Trey Burke to Derek Walton, all of whom have played in the NBA at some point. Burke was the National Player of the Year here.
And he's really coming on strong with the Knicks.
He is. Derek Walton was honestly at that level for the last month or so of last season. And I'm not saying that Xavier Simpson or any of the other point guards on this roster can't get to the NBA. I'm just pointing out, I think that factors into the expectations for the position. Simpson is playing. He does a lot of things well. He shooting 57% from 2-point range, which is 10 points higher than Walton was. So he can finish at the rim despite his size. He's a great defender. The offense does flow better with him in the.
You just watch it. I mean, even someone who's not an expert, you can watch it and see that the offense is more efficient when he's in the game as opposed to Brooks or Simmons. And not to say that those guys are just learning the offense. Simpson's been in it for 2 years now, so you can see why there's frustration in terms of the free throw shooting and the 3-point shooting. But that offense looks better when he's in the game, and he can really get to the rack and he can finish.
Absolutely. A lot of talk that Beilein gets asked about this. I see comments about it as far as that backup point guard spot. Beilein has said it's more about. Recently, it's been more about Jordan Poole and some of the other guys having the best 5 on the floor than it is, that the backup point guards that's a problem.
Right.
Because they could slide Muhammad Ali, Abdur-Rahman to that point guard spot and go a little bigger and, not necessarily give up too much on defense. So, yeah, it's been interesting to watch this team because, like you said, early in the season, you lose to LSU. That's probably their worst loss. They've kind of avoided.
And at that point, a lot of people are thinking, okay, this is going to be a down year.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not going to make a big run. Maybe not even make the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Then look where we are. We're heading into March, and the team is ranked in the top 20. And suddenly, the whole season is completely different than maybe some fan expectations early on. Was that always the case, though?
I had them in my preview. I said they could get there to the top 4 of the Big Ten.
So you called it early on. You said you thought they were going to get there.
Pat himself on the back.
There we go. Okay.
I mean, at the same time, you knew Purdue was going to be very good. You knew Michigan State was going to be very good. I certainly did not see this season from Ohio State, but after last night, they are
I don't think anyone did. Yeah.
first in the Big Ten. But yeah, I mean, come Big Ten tournament time, I think it's open. I think those teams I just mentioned, Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan State, certainly will be among the favorites. But I think there's 6 teams that can win this, and the other 3, Michigan would be among them. Michigan, Northwestern, and Nebraska. Those are 2 other teams to watch because they're playing well right now.
Right.
Maybe that goes into what you were just saying, and we brought this up in the pre-show meeting. But are conditions right? I mean, does Michigan have a Big Ten tournament run in it like it did last season? Is that a possibility?
Yes. Again, there are things that need to clean up, but the defense has been pretty consistent, and that's nice to hang your hat on.
And kind of new for a Beilein team, which is
Definitely.
not known for defense and rebounding. This team can rebound, and
that's been really the most impressive thing. They're never going to send a lot of players to the offensive glass and do well in that area, but they clean up on the defensive boards. I mean, and they've done it against teams that can rebound. It's not there was a time in the Big Ten it might have looked like it was a bit of a fluke based on who they were playing, and then they went up against Purdue and Michigan State, and it held up. So
Right.
that's for real. Some of it is embracing that element of the game a little more. The last 2 years, they've had 2 new assistant coaches.
Right.
This year, it's Luke Yaklich as the sort of defensive coordinator, who stressed that, but it's personnel too. I mean, Charles Matthews now in his first year is a great defensive rebounder. Xavier Simpson out of the point guard spot is very good there.
Taking up the mantle from Walton, who
Absolutely.
was a fantastic rebounding guard.
And then Mo Wagner is just completely transformed himself. He was just tired of hearing about it. He said, he'd hear about it from his dad. He'd see the NBA, when he dipped his toes into the NBA draft waters, heard about that from teams, heard about it from his coaches, saw it on social media, and he was just tired of it.
Yeah.
And he's made a change.
So as we approach the Big Ten tournament, and to sort of wrap up here, what are going to be the key factors that gives them a run? Do you need to see improvement from any one player, from the system? What do you think is going to be the thing that, if they do make a push in either tournament, what that will be?
I'd say a little more trust in the offensive system. There were times I was at the game at Northwestern. Northwestern runs that zone defense. It's given a lot of teams trouble lately. But Michigan had success early because they were trusting what they were seeing. A guy was open. They didn't waste time. They hit him on the run. As far as their backdoor cuts and things like that. Then just indecisiveness started to creep in a bit. So I'd say that just from ball movement standpoint, you don't want the ball to stick. Beeline is always bad that you do not want the ball to stick. You want it to keep moving.
Especially against the zone, which has hurt them at times this year.
Absolutely. And then I guess some regression to the mean with some of the outside shooting. I mean, Duncan Robinson has the track record.
Right. He's not a 35% shooter. He's a 45%. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but circumstances play into that as far as whether he's the, 4th or 5th option that guys have to worry about versus, well, we can key on him now,
right.
Given who else is out there on the floor. So I'd say, improved shot making. And I mean, you mentioned free throws briefly, but
that's been a huge.
That one I don't see. It's tough. Teams don't generally just turn it around from the foul line after.
They've shot enough free throws this year. I feel like that's probably what you're going to get. The numbers are there. Drastic improvement would be real surprising.
Absolutely.
And in close games, that has hurt them, but they've also been able to pull out close games because they have such sound defense. They got depth, and you got to like what you're seeing from the team leaders and Matthews and Wagner. So we're running out of time here, but so everyone knows, this is a weekly podcast. Normally, we will be launching the podcast every Monday. This is a special this week, being our first episode, and also following up on signing day. Again, I'm Eli Zink.
I'm Aaron McMann.
I'm Andrew Kahn.
It's been great talking with you guys, and we'll see you on Monday.